Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, buenos días, buenas tardes. We will wait just a couple of seconds more so that everybody has the chance to get into the webinar and to get really the audio going. So just give us a couple of seconds and welcome to this event. So I will just keep talking a little bit so that you guys know that the audio is working. So welcome everybody. Again, let's see, I see that people are getting in still, so let's wait a couple of seconds more. Thank you for your patience. As you know, we do have interpretation for this event. So if you go to the lower part of the Zoom, you will see an icon of the word, and then you can click on it and you can choose the channel that you want to participate with. We also have another icon for questions and answers where you can put your questions. We are going to be collecting questions as we go through, and we will allow questions during after 3 of the speakers so that we will have hopefully a very interactive session. And should we go ahead? Yeah?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Then let me, oops, no, on bottom. Let me share my screen. I'm sorry. Can you see my screen?
Yes, still in the PowerPoint view though, not in. Yep, perfect.
Okay, it's coming. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to the event entitled "The Role of Indigenous Peoples and Local Communities in Conserving the Amazon and Preventing Tipping Points." I'm Marielos Peñaclaros. I'm the co-chair of the science panel for the Amazon. I work at the Wageningen University and Research in the Netherlands, and I will be the moderator of the session today. As you get out of. We have today 7 speakers, and I will be, here you see pictures of them, but I will introduce them in more detail as I call them for the presentations. Before we start, I would like to give a very short overview of the science panel for the Amazon. Here we go. The Science Panel for the Amazon was established by the Sustainable Development Solution Network in September 2019 in New York. At that moment that you probably, a lot of you remember when we had all these fires going on in the Amazon. It was inspired by the Leticia Pact, and at this moment it is composed by more than 250, I think, at this moment, scientists that are actually part of the science panel for the Amazon. The majority of these authors, 65% of them are actually researchers coming from Amazonian countries, and we include, and among the authors, several indigenous scientist authors are also included. We have a strategic committee and a scientific steering committee as well that guide the panel on the decision-making process. The main objectives of the science panel for the Amazon is to systematize information for a scientific assessment of the state of Amazonian ecosystem and its populations, is to examine also to examine the trends and implications for the region's long-term well-being, and to explore opportunities and policy options for the conservation and sustainable development of the Amazon. So you may wonder what have we done so far. So from the moment of its creation to the panel work on producing the first Amazon assessment report that consists of 3 parts, as you can see here. And this assessment report was launched in Glasgow in November 2021. And basically the report, the main message of the report was to provide a warning that the region is approaching a dangerous tipping point due to deforestation, degradation, and climate change. But it also provided a series of potential solutions to overcome these issues. Sorry, my internet one way or the other is slow today. The panel has also in COP27 in November 22, we also launched 3 policy briefs that are included in here. And in these policy briefs, we call for a global climate action to reduce emissions and to start thinking about how we could develop large-scale efforts leading to a higher resilience of Amazon forest, and also how, and in these documents as well, we discuss the need to define funding streams and to recognize that a just and equitable transition is a priority for the Amazon. So one of the policy briefs we launched was focused on tipping points. The second one was focused on arcs of restoration. So what can we do to restore the areas that have been deforested in the Amazon? And finally, we had a policy brief that I think is very relevant for the discussions today on the role of Amazonian indigenous people in fighting the climate crisis. As you all know, the Amazon is facing many challenges when it comes to its protection or to conservation. And there are many socio-ecological transformations going on, like such as a wildfire, that are these transformations are due to deforestation and degradation and processes leading to that, such as land grabbing or illegal logging. But there are also many challenges related to wildfires and illegal mining and roads, and all these, and many of these challenges are actually leading to changes in the system, such as that our changes in our systems that are listed here, but Luciana is going to be talking much more detail on this. I will go rather quickly on that. Is that we are observing longer dry season lengths. There is an increased water deficit, and that is leading to changes in the mortality rate of wet globing tree species. So they have a higher mortality than trees that are actually much more adapted to drought. And all these changes, together with higher rates of deforestation and higher incidence of fires, are pushing certain areas of the Amazon, like southern Amazon, towards tipping points, which is certainly very dangerous. So one of the things that we have been thinking about in the report is what can we do to reduce the risk of ecological and social tipping points. And we, in the third part of the report, we came with some recommendations that briefly can be summarized in we recommend that we really need to stop deforestation, also stop degradation and wildfires due to the negative impact they have in the forest. And we need to develop and implement a plan leading to forest conservation and restoration. And that we also need to define new economic strategies. And the one that has been proposed by the panel, but by several other organizations, is a new bioeconomy of healthy standing forests and flowing rivers. And obviously, to get all of this going on, we need to have the commitment of governments at different scales, local, state scales, and also national levels, but also we need the support of the international government to achieve these goals. And one of the conclusions that came also very clearly from the report is that the indigenous people and local communities, they play a very critical role in the sustainable use and conservation of Amazonian diversity and ecosystems. And this is probably because of the long history of the relation that indigenous people have with the Amazon as a system, with over 12,000 years of human history. It's currently we have around 2.2 million indigenous people living in the Amazon, belonging to different communities and talking more than 300 languages. And we really think that indigenous people, but also local communities, can play a significant role. And I want to highlight this by the significant role that I want to highlight the importance of indigenous communities with these two examples that also highlight the threat that indigenous peoples are facing. One of them is related to the protection of the original rights of indigenous peoples over their territories. Not long ago, it was decided at least that the local indigenous communities will be maintaining their territory rights in Brazil. It's a process that is going on, but the indigenous people have been very active in this process. And I think what has been achieved is thanks to them. And a similar example is the public consultation that took place in Ecuador on halting oil drilling in the Gasodá Park. And we can say that this has been also a major achievement in saying that the Ecuadorian population saying, yes, let's stop oil drilling in the Gasodá Park. So these are just two examples on the threats that indigenous people are facing, but also how important they are for the conservation of the Amazon. So without further ado, with this very short introduction on the panel, I would like to give the floor to our first speaker. Luciana Gatti is going to be talking about why the Amazon forest is changing and how indigenous peoples and local communities are so important to avoid the tipping point. I will stop sharing my screen now, Luciana, so that you can put your presentation. And while you put your presentation up, I would like to tell a little bit about you. Luciana is a researcher in the National Institute of Space Research in Brazil. She has a PhD in science from the São Carlos Federal University. And she is also a researcher with the National Council for Scientific and Technological Development. So, Luciana, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Bom dia, buenos dias. I speak in English. Let me share my screen here. I will share the studies we do in carbon balance, carbon budget, and to try to understand this balance and why we observe so different. We start to look Amazon in the other sense and understand the carbon emissions. We are talking about more than 1,000 vertical profiles in the Amazon. We run the vertical profiles from 4.4 kilometer high until low, and we have many flasks, and this is the way we can calculate the flux for each vertical profile. Then we calculate the flux, the mean flux for the months, then for the year, and then now we have 11 years vertical profiles for these 4 places, 4 sites represent very different regions, and why we observed different behaviors in the Amazon. This is the time series we have. And here is the flux. This is the mean flux you can see for each region from January to December, the mean from 9 years, and in the gray, you see the variability between these 9 years. And it's clear how we see difference, from the northeast part, from southeast part, from the 2 west, northwest, southwest. We see the highest emission come from northeast part and then southeast. And the west is around neutral. Why? Why so big, so distant the behavior from the forest, since it's all Amazon forest. And usually people do the analysis considering the same ratios for all, whatever people are studying, the same behavior for the Amazon. But in the carbon emissions we observe, they are very different. Then we start to try understand why. The first time we understood these differences when we calculate how much is the forested region. The northeast part, the highest carbon emissions, is the most deforested region. Then comes southeast, the second highest emission is the second highest deforested region. And then this west part. But look, you see that this region is starting the west part, but go until east because the air masses go traveling, around the whole Amazon. Then the region of influence is the whole. If we look, all this is 16, but if we look more near the site, because near the site, you can see here, the part near have a stronger influence than in the distance. If we put the influence, then you'll be node 16, it will be less. If we consider more the regions near the place, we will see around 11% the forest, 10%, something like this. The same for here. And then look, here we see high deforestation, highest than 20%. We have a very high carbon emissions, lowest than 20%, neutral. What means neutral carbon emissions? This can mean the forests are promoting carbon sink, carbon absorption, enough to compensate all carbon emissions the human activities are doing there. Okay, now we start to study what happens with precipitation and temperature in the last 40 years, considering this deforestation coming from a long time. And we observed the regions more deforested, there is much less precipitation than the regions less deforested, more preserved. This is the precipitation in August, September, October, that is the peak of dry season where happens the burning season because the ecosystem are very drought and it's when people put fire after they deforested many months before. And here we see actually, we are observing, for example, 2018, in the northeast part, the precipitation during 3 months is in the mean just 42 milliliters. Jesus, this is a tropical forest ecosystem. How can trees survive in a so small precipitation? The second most deforested is a little bit more than 60 milliliter. When we see this region less than 20% deforested, we observe it. This dashed line is below the dash is dry season. Above the dash line is wet season. And then we see just small years ago, this region have a very clear 3 months dry season. Is starting now, but before include was less than 3 months dry season, and here it was after the 2000 that we start to have 3 months dry season. And in the total amount, you see the precipitation here is much higher. This can mean less stress for the forest during dry season. When we look at the temperature, we observe the same pattern. The regions more deforested show a highest increase in temperature than the regions less deforested. And include in the southeast of Amazon is the worst situation. The increase in during August, September, October, it was 2.5 degrees, and it is no more linear. Now is exponential. What this means? Each year, the increase of temperature is more high, is accelerating. This can mean we are in a big stress, climatic stress in this region every dry season. In 2021, in September, our colleagues that have plots measured there 50 degrees in the canopy level in a plot of a forest. How can trees from tropical forest survive in this condition? This is what we need to think when we observe it, that the places more deforested, the regions more deforested show a much higher carbon emissions than other, because there, during dry season, the climate stress is very high. This is more than, say, the global climate change. This is also a climate change promoted by deforestation, by activities there from deforestation and degradation. And what is in the back of this deforestation? Here we see in this red line the exportation of wood. Just in the first 2 years of the Bolsonaro government, comparing 2019 to 2020, with the 9 years before, from 2010 to 2018, the exportation of wood from Amazon increases 700%. The area of a plantation of soybean increases 70%, corn 60%, and the cattle increasing 13% in the Amazon. This is what we have in the back of the large increase in carbon emissions during 2019 and 2020, where we observed 122% increase in carbon emissions. This shows to us how much this ecosystem is sensitive to these drivers, to these economic drivers that go promoting deforestation and degradation, and how we are losing Amazon as a carbon sink. Here we can see in the area 1, that is the northeast and the southeast part, the total deforested around 28%. The carbon emissions is 0.34 billion tons of carbon per year. You can see here the total carbon emissions, the fire carbon emissions, and here is the other part. You see in 11 years, only 3 years, the Amazon was sink, removing fire. But in this region too, that is only 8% deforested, every year is sink, but we have the fire emissions. Then the result is around neutral, represent just 0.04 billion tons. Compare, this region emit 80 times more carbon than this region. And this show to us how much the area deforested will impact the area that still is there. The forest that still is there is impacted from the deforestation, because deforestation not only represents the carbon emissions, represents also changing climate conditions that will promote stress in the forest that still is there, that will be no more the sink. But the mortality increase, and degradation increase, and the flammability in the forest increase, promoting much more carbon emissions than we think. If we look our 11 years, we see this increasing in 122% when we compare 2020 with these means. And here we observe how climate impact very strongly, you know, because here was a moderate El Niño with anomaly of a temperature in the ocean Atlantic, and here was a wet year. And then here was the strongest El Niño we know, we study, we could see the effect. And the carbon emissions from Amazon is the worst. And then now, please, attention, we are starting El Niño stronger than 2015 and 16. And then let's understand that Amazon will get fire uncontrolled, you know, and then we need to avoid all biomass burning, because the temperature will be much higher and the forest will be much drier. And then we need actions, emergencial, since now, to don't lose more areas, more forest, with the strongest El Niño that will be 23, 24. Okay, and then this is the difference in carbon emissions from 2010 to 2018, and then we see how after increasing around 90% in deforestation, we more than double carbon emissions in the Amazon. And this map show, you know, here is an indigenous territory and protected territory. We can see in the red is where we have deforestation in this ecosystem. Inside the areas of indigenous people, just 1.5% is deforested. And outside, in the mean, is 24. But we consider, for example, the arc of deforestation, it's very, very highly deforested. And then let's pay attention and how indigenous territories are very important to preserve Amazon, to avoid climate change that will compromise the forest that still is there, and how also is important the suggestion to arc of reforestation in the arc of deforestation, because this region is changing the climate conditions, mainly during dry season, that will compromise also the regions preserved inside the indigenous territories and the protected areas and all other areas. This is my key message for you, and thank you very much. And then just to conclude that every year dry season represents a big stress for the forest, and over the time, the dry season becoming drier, hotter, and longer, compromising the forest that still is there and affect carbon sink ability. Increasing forest flammability, degradation is more extensive, and the deforestation represents direct emissions, but also indirect emissions because promote this stress, climate stress during dry season. And this is why are so important the forest guardians, from Amazon, Indigenous, and the local communities to preserve the forest. Thank you very much.
Thank you to you, Luciana, for your presentation and for providing us the really the most updated overview about the situation in terms of carbon emissions and carbon.
Thank you for the opportunity, Maria Luz.
You're very welcome. Please, for the audience, I know that you probably have. I'm aware that you probably have questions for Luciana. Please write them down in the chat, and we will have later on a bit of time for questions. So now I would like to invite to give her presentation to Carmen Josse. Carmen will, the title of her presentation is Deforestation in the Amazon to 2025, Past and Future. While you upload your presentation, Carmen, I would like to say that Carmen Josse is a director of the Fundación EcoCiencia in Ecuador. She has many years of experience working on producing and managing information on biodiversity to support its planning, management, and conservation policies. So she has experience with different methods and products of classification, mapping, and evaluation of ecosystems at the national level and throughout Latin America. Carmen, if you're ready, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Voy a cambiar a español. Espero que me entiendan mejor, así también puedo ir un poquito más rápido. Es un gusto estar esta mañana en este webinar. Saludos a todos y a todas. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos. EcoCiencia, una fundación en Ecuador, es parte de la Red Amazónica de Información Socioambiental Georreferenciada. Esta red ha venido produciendo información para la Amazonía de una manera integral, considerando toda la región, digamos, y los países que hacen parte de esa región en los análisis que hacemos de monitoreo sobre el cambio de uso del suelo, la deforestación y también las presiones y amenazas que se dan en esta gran región. Entonces, este estudio que voy a presentar es un estudio hecho por la red, por los técnicos de la red amazónica, tomando en consideración la deforestación, el análisis de deforestación que se hizo para el periodo del año 2000 al 2020. A partir de ahí se hizo esta proyección hacia los próximos 5 años en los que ya estamos andando. La región que considera como gran cuenca amazónica y además algo más, esta red en su límite como área de análisis, en total cubre aproximadamente 8.5 millones de kilómetros cuadrados. La porción que constituye bosque de este gran espacio es o fue
Bear with us all. We'll give it one more minute.
Carmen.
Marielos, I don't know if you want to go to our
Yeah.
next speaker and come back to Carmen.
Yeah, maybe that would be the way to go. Okay, so Anne may introduce you then. So Anne Alicar will be talking about threats to indigenous territories, their significance in terms of ecosystem services, and the role of transnational initiatives in reducing these impacts. Anne is Science Director of the Amazon Environmental Research Institute, IPAM, and is also member of the Science Panel for the Amazon, as well as Luciana and Carmen. Anne Alencar is a geographer and fire scientist with a Master in Environmental Remote Sensing and GIS from Boston University and a PhD in Forest Resource and Conservation at the University of Florida. And she has ample of experience both working in the Amazon but also in other ecosystems of Brazil like Cerrado. And if I can give you, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marielos. It's a pleasure to be here talking about a very important issue. And I will share my presentation. So I'll be talking about threats to indigenous territories, their significance in terms of ecosystem service, and the role of transnational initiatives in reducing these impacts. So Marielos, please, I will ask you to tell me when the time is up or near, close to up. Okay. Okay. So just giving a perspective of the extent of indigenous territories in the Amazon. So we have about 28, almost 29% of the Amazon under indigenous territories in different types of degrees of formalization. Most of them are in Brazil, around 48%, and Peru, Venezuela, Colombia are the next countries with the most area of indigenous territories. But if you can see by the map, if you look Peru, Colombia, Venezuela, for example, if you do in terms of percentage of the country, is very significant. They have a very significant amount of area designated or claimed by indigenous peoples. So, and what are the importance of these territories to the globe, to the region, to the globe? Well, 34% of the Amazon forest is inside these territories. And it's about 34% as well of the carbon stocks in the Amazon are inside these territories as well. They have the potential to recycle about 1/3 of the water that is recycled by trees in the region. And they make, in some parts of the region, they make at least they are at least 5 degrees Celsius cooler than outside the areas that are mostly in the agricultural frontier. And this is a clear example of the Xingu Park, which is an indigenous territory in Mato Grosso state. So this is the Xingu waterheads, and you can see very clearly that this first map is the land use map. So the green is the forest, and yellow is pasture, agriculture. And you see, and the second map, the B map, is like the temperature, surface temperature map, and you see very the amount of difference in terms of surface temperature inside the forest and outside the forest. And the third map is the evapotranspiration, which represents the amount of water that is released to the atmosphere. So meaning that conserving cultures is also conserving forests and also conserving key ecosystem services. Another example here is the comparison of for the Brazilian Amazon, all the indigenous territories in the Brazilian Amazon, and the average temperature in these territories compared to outside protected areas. And also the evapotranspiration, so they are much cooler and they release more water to the atmosphere. What are the main threats? And Mariello's presented very well. I mean, most of the threats that these areas face: mining, new roads, not main roads, but illegal roads, logging, dams, other types of infrastructure, cattle ranching just nearby, and or sometimes invading the area. Also large-scale agriculture, maybe not inside the indigenous lands, but also releasing some pesticide that affect these areas. But the most, I would say, the most threat is the dispute for land. And we now in Brazil are facing a serious threat, like legislative threat to indigenous lands with the marco temporal, which is a serious thing and is being disputed now in the Congress. So, and now from now on, I will talk about these threats from a Brazilian Amazon perspective. So just to give you an idea on the deforestation. So Luciana showed that only 1.5% of the indigenous territories in the Amazon are deforested. And so they represent about 1/4, 25% of the national territory. And in 2022, they were, how can I say, 2% of the deforestation happened inside these territories only. And I should say that, and you see in the next slides, that most of the deforestation that happened in these territories, which represent this 2%, are related to illegal activities. And just to give you a perspective, a temporal perspective of this deforestation, when we had Bolsonaro's government in the first year, we had a major increase in deforestation in the Amazon, this 2008-2009 rate here, and then that was decreasing. And you see also, you can see also as well that deforestation is very concentrated in some of the indigenous territories here in the map. So illegal logging is also another important issue, not only indigenous territories, but in the Amazon as a whole. But indigenous territories has its role because a lot of people ask for permission, they get the permission, and they use the permission to, we say, to actually make legal, illegal timber that has been logged inside the protected areas, and in this case, indigenous territories. And you can see that the timber that comes, or the area that has been logged inside the indigenous territories, represent almost 6% of the authorized timber, and in terms of unauthorized is about 11%. And you can see also there's some regions here in Xingu, mostly some regions here in the south of Amazonas, northern Rondônia, and also in these areas of East Pará and West Pará along the Amazon River. The unofficial roads are also a major threat because they represent all these access points to either timber or or mining or gold, and is an indicator of how bad these areas are. So we have up to 12,000 square kilometers of unofficial roads that were mapped outside indigenous territories, and almost 6,000 square kilometers of unofficial roads were mapped inside ITs. This is a work from Amazon, and they have been doing this in several points of time. And it's very impressive to see how these unofficial roads are growing. In terms of fire, it's very interesting to see that only 3% of the Amazon indigenous territories, they encompass or they include almost 50% of all fire occurrences in the indigenous territories, which means that they are very concentrated, and they are concentrated in areas that are either right there in the frontier, agricultural frontier, or in areas that are far from agricultural frontier, but have lots of ecosystems that are fire dependent. And this takes us to a point that is very important to highlight, which is the cultural burns. So indigenous peoples, they do have a way, they use a fire as a tool in their productive systems, and include burning, for example, savannas to hunt, or even to reduce fuel. So they are very good managers, fire managers. They have been practicing these cultural burnings for, I don't know, hundreds and thousands of years. So, but they burn in a different period of the year, and they burn in a different way. So, because they know if they have a wildfire, that would be really bad for their food security. So when you look those numbers, it's very important to analyze this type of things. The fire that comes from outside and is in fact impacting these forests, and the cultural burns that do happen in these territories, and they are very important for the culture systems. The mining as well, I mean, the numbers are very impressive. You can see from this map biomas data set here on illegal mining, which are garimpos, and how it increased inside indigenous territories since 2016-17, but from 2018-19, it's jumped. So it increased 265% of the area that is mined inside illegal mining, mined inside the indigenous territories in the Brazilian Amazon. And this means that when you look at the age of this mining, we see that 62% of the area mined were opened in the past 5 years. So it is really amazing. It's really a problem that is going on inside indigenous territories in Brazil. And what I have seen from the RISE data, this is also a problem outside in the other indigenous territories outside Brazil. Not only illegal mining, but also industrial mining. Well, all these compounded impacts, land use change and things, are interacting with climate change and affecting a lot, not only the indigenous peoples, but mostly indigenous peoples and other forest-based people. So we have seen severe droughts, forest fires, floods. There are major effects of this climate change, and interaction between climate change and land use change. And those things, they do create externalities that go beyond the borders. So if a farmer is burning here in Brazil, and the smoke from this fire will travel and can travel far, and will affect population, the people that live not only in the rural area but in the cities. But however, people that live in the forest, they sometimes don't have health care. I mean, health. They don't have access to doctors and this type of things. So which make their situation even worse. Another thing is water. Climate change, land use change also impacts water, which is vital for this type of people. And what we have seen is a very oscillation on the water, surface water in the Amazon. Some areas are increasing of water, some other areas are decreasing of water, mostly the lakes, some of the lakes, which are major areas of fisheries and this type of activities, which impact very drastically the food security of these communities. The mining also polluted the water, and this is just an example of a river that this is here in very, how can I say, white, is a river, is not a border of a map, is a river, and it has lots of mining. You can see some of them here, but some of them are upstream. And you can see when it gets to Tapajós River, you see very clearly the potential of the mining as a pollutant in the river. And this, in the other side, is indigenous territory. So you can see that this is a very important problem for these people. And lastly, this is just came, is going viral in the webpage, and the situation of drought in some parts of the Amazon is actually taking the rivers to dry and the water to get very, very hot, and the fishes to die. And let me stop here. I don't know how to stop. And this has lots of potential, not only to impact the environment, as you can see, the fisheries, the fishery communities and other types of species, but also for the riverine population that lives around these areas that won't have good water to drink and neither fish to eat. So there are many other serious consequences of climate change impacts on these people, and we have to do something about it. So I would say that territorial security and strategies for adaptation are key issues that we have to really come to strategies to solve it. And to take these people out of this line of insecurity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Annie, for your presentation, for the good overview of the consequences and the status of indigenous territories in the Amazon. Please, as I said before, please keep your questions, write them down in the chat, and we will try to get as many questions as possible after the presentation of Carmen. Carmen is back with us. Thank you, Carmen. If you could upload your presentation again, hopefully we will work out this time. Study.
I
Yeah,
have
so-
it ready too. If you want me to share it, you just need to tell me what slide you were on.
Yeah. Carmen, did you prefer that Laura shares your presentation? Maybe that will work better for you.
I think I can now. So sorry.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for your patience. So I was saying before that this is the geographical area of the analysis, and then that basically we look more specifically to the period between 2000 and 2020. To see how was the deforestation, not only in the number of hectares, but also how it was distributed in this big area. So in 20 years, the Amazon lost 20, perdón, voy a cambiar a español nuevamente, me disculpan. Perdió 54 millones de hectáreas en ese periodo. Es un área prácticamente similar a la de España. Aquí tenemos una curva que nos indica estos periodos a lo largo de esos 20 años, donde podemos ver picos y bajadas en cuanto a las tasas de deforestación para esta área. Sin
Carmen.
embargo, y entonces vemos claramente como distintos periodos que obedecen también a distintos momentos de aplicación de política pública. Por supuesto que Brasil tiene un rol importantísimo en lo que demuestra esta curva, aunque la curva es para toda la región. Como
Carmen?
podemos ver, ¿sí?
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but can you select Spanish for the interpretation so that the simultaneous is working? I think you might be in original audio or maybe the English channel. Sorry to interrupt you.
Okay, just this. I need to. Here. I am trying to see where I can select the interpretation.
Yeah.
¿Tienes?
Apologies. At the bottom of the Zoom window in the middle, there's like a globe icon. And if you click it, you should be able to just choose Spanish from the option.
At this
Sorry, I'm
point,
sure it went away too. Your slides, I'm sure we're full screen and
okay. So let me switch to English. I will try to go fast, even though I'm speaking in English. So it's better now if I continue in English. So basically, then what I was saying is that I wanted to show with this curve how there are different periods of deforestation rates. And that is something that we used in our projections to the 2025, which is what I will show in a minute. So the average annual deforestation for the whole period was 2,700,000 hectares. Now, when we look at how this deforestation was distributed, not only in terms of the countries, but also in terms of these different categories of management within the Amazon, so to speak. For one, we have indigenous territories, and we looked at how was deforestation doing over this period of time within indigenous territories, within protected natural areas. There are also large extensions of overlap between indigenous territories and natural protected areas. And of course, what is the outside of those two kinds of management areas. Outside is everything else. So of course, when we look at the, in terms of extensions or areas of deforestation, the largest numbers occur outside indigenous territories and natural protected areas. And over the period of 20 years, in terms of percentage, proportionally, you can see by every country or for every country what the proportion of deforestation was within those two areas of protection, right? Of course, it varies a lot among the countries, but when you look at the proportion of the whole Amazon or the deforestation in the whole Amazon region that occurred within indigenous territories and protected areas, it was very low, just 14% of the whole. Furthermore, when we did also an analysis trying to look at where are currently by 2020 the areas that are still conserved, that hold probably the most functionality and the most provision of different ecosystem services, carbon, water, of course, biodiversity, a diversity of ecosystems and topography and areas like that. So we came up with a large extension still viable within the Amazon, almost 74% of that huge region that I have been talking, for the analysis. 2.2 million square kilometers of that occurs within indigenous territories. So this is just to stress out how important is what the indigenous territories areas in the Amazon still hold in terms of integrity, diversity, and forest, of course, and other ecosystem services derived of that. However, we also, as Rice did this analysis by the year 2020 as well, with information about the drivers of deforestation, which includes roads, navigable rivers, landing strips, all types of infrastructure, also hydroelectric infrastructure, oil blocks, mining, agriculture, and livestock. So when you see this map on the right, it shows basically that with different degrees probably of pressure or intensity of pressures, but 66% of the Amazon is subjected to some type or some level of pressures that in turn generates deforestation or in other cases degradation, which my colleagues have been already explaining how to understand it and see it. So with basically using an approach of forest accessibility and all the data from not only the data but the different 5-year periods of the 20 years of analysis of actual data, we projected 3 different scenarios of deforestation that could occur for the period between 2021 and 2025. So one of them is the moderate scenario, where this is also spatial analysis, of course. And with the moderate scenario, we show that deforestation will increase by almost 60%, reaching in only 5 years 16.6 million hectares. So that is one scenario. The pessimistic scenario, which is using the to project, we use the 5-year rates, the worst 5-year period rates of deforestation. And looking at that, we can see that deforestation will grow almost 130%, accumulating 23.7 million additional hectares to the deforestation already that we saw by 2020. So this is an additional area equivalent to the extension of the United Kingdom of Ecuador. And we also modeled a optimistic scenario, which gave a result that it could be 10% lower than in the previous 5-year period. So these are the different scenarios that we are looking to until 2025. And again, when we look at how this projected deforestation could occur, comparing outside indigenous territories and protected area and inside, you can see still that there are differences, of course, but in the blue, you can see the number of square kilometers that could occur within those managed areas, and in red, the outside. And you can see that the difference is still important, but we in the following, we can see that even though the predicted in the pre-predicted scenarios, indigenous territories in protected areas account for less than 20%, which is very encouraging, very important, of course, because they occupy almost slightly more than 50% of the Amazon. So those are our strongholds, basically. The places where we can work and should work very intensively, not only, of course, but if we want to continue looking at the trends that many studies have shown about the protection that these indigenous territories provide to deforestation or against deforestation and degradation in the Amazon, we need to understand where it will occur. So the scenarios, of course, provide a frame of reference of what could happen if, and this is to conclude basically, that in the optimistic scenarios, probably we can think in a way that this scenario corresponds to an Amazon region where regulations and controls are enforced on the activities that lead to deforestation. And also strategies for management, excuse me, oh my God. Well, but it's what you can imagine, right? That if regulations are enforced and a number of different strategies for maintaining the territorial rights, the access to funding and opportunities for different types of interventions, or rather sustainable livelihoods in the protected areas, in the indigenous territories, we probably can be looking at an optimistic scenario. But if policies go the other way around, in the opposite direction, allowing and not really enforcing any type of regulation, we can be looking at very problematic, to say the least, scenarios in a short time. In fact, we could even start to test some of these projections by now. Thank you very much, and I am really sorry for all the inconvenience. I hope you could follow me anyway. Thank you for the patience and for the space.
No, thank you. Thank you to you, Carmen. I think it went very well, and thank you for your flexibility in dealing with all these issues on poor internet connection and switching languages. I think you did perfectly. Thank you very much. So what I would like to do now is to thank the three of you again, so Luciana, and Carmen, for your presentations. And we have received several questions, and I would like to give the floor, the opportunity to you to answer these questions for the coming 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. So let's see. One of the questions that Santiago, this is for you, Luciana. It's a bit a specific question, but maybe you could elaborate a bit more, Luciana. Santiago Obispo was asking if you could tell a little bit more about your results, specifically for Roraima and the North Amazon.
Marielos,
Yeah.
is the Santiago comment in 1114?
Let me see. Yeah, I have a summary. Sorry, Luciana. So the question was if you could tell a little bit more about the situation in Roraima. What would you expect in that area of the Amazon?
The impact of the actions in Roraima is very strong. We observed in 2019, the carbon emissions was very high. This was how we find out that something very different was happening in Amazon. When we calculated the carbon emissions from this region, it was so abnormally high. We never saw this. Usually it was neutral. And then I called to the guy that work with deforestation from products, Claudio Almeida, and what has happened there. And then this is how they come to work with us, calculating the deforestation, and we observed the deforestation, and the fire was very, very high there. The way we observe is a very large area because we measure with vertical profiles, and how higher you measure, the influence region is higher. Then I cannot say only about Rondônia or Roraima, sorry, but is the northeast and center region that is no more neutral. This can mean the emissions there are much higher than what forestry can promote absorption. And this is very scary, and we need to have more actions. Are you talking about just Roraima inside, or it's about petroleum in the coast?
Because what will be you reading with if you will add petroleum in the coast?
Oh, okay. Petroleum in the coast, we have a measure with vertical profile in the coast, and we found out a very big sink in this region in the ocean. And this sink happens because the phytoplankton are very rich there, because nutrients come from Amazon River, and then the phytoplankton there is much higher in concentration, and they promote more photosynthesis. The sink per cubic meter is more than 10 times higher what the Amazon promote in carbon sink. If we sink in the sink this region promote, this region is more important than Amazon for carbon sink. But when we can see this in chlorophyll image. You can get chlorophyll image from satellite. you see a big chlorophyll, strong color in this region. And in the months where the Amazon River discharge is higher, the color is higher, and the sink is higher. Then petroleum exploration in this region can compromise not only the corals there and the amazing life, many species that is there, but also carbon sink from the phytoplankton in this region. This is research we've done some years before from our group, not yet published. Sorry, we need to publish this because this is a very important information. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Luciana. Maybe a question which is a bit, I think, challenging to answer, but I think it's a very relevant question, and it is about if you will share your experience in collaborating with indigenous and local communities in terms of research and some of the scientific studies that we have been sharing. It was interesting knowing what were the barriers and how you have dealt with them. Maybe some of I don't know if Anne, Carmen could share some of your experience with that.
Would be amazing. Please contact me, get the email, and let's do. I will be very, very happy. And invite if some researcher would you like to come and make part of the group, could be amazing also.
Yeah, thank you. Anne or Carmen, I mean, this is also, I think, very much related to all of you, also the speakers who haven't given the presentation yet. But Anne, if you could share with us some of your experience.
My experience with working with indigenous groups.
In terms of collaborative research.
Yeah, we have had a very fruitful experience and exchange with indigenous groups in the territorial monitoring arena, and also developing together very important pieces so they can use as an advocacy. And I can give you some examples. During COVID, for example, we developed a piece called is not only numbers, our lives, which was developed together with COIAB about the rate of COVID inside the indigenous lands and how that may, how can I say, relate with some threats of mining, indigenous invasion, and some types like that. We developed an app so they had to help them to collect how can I say, to understand how many people were dying, getting sick, and this type of things. We did several other studies, including papers on the expansion of these threats to the territory, the impacts of climate in terms of like anomaly of drought. So this is one part of the thing. And also we have been we have developed another app called Alerta Clima Indígena, like Indigenous Climate Alert, which helps to map and monitor all the main threats to the territory. And they use this data set as, I mean, we have several examples on how they use this data set to take to the public autonomy, to expanding their land, and to do all this type of, to send to IBAMA, to FUNAI. So I think this is most of our interaction with indigenous groups and leaders. And we also support the SINC, which is the, how can I say, it's an Indigenous Committee for Climate Change. We support with capacity building on climate issues, climate change issues.
On this topic, what I can comment is something similar. this is talking as EcoCiencia in Ecuador, but I know many of our colleagues in the RISE network do also territorial work. What we do is a lot like Annie was saying, monitoring with indigenous monitors in their territories, using different technologies also, so that they can record what is happening in doing different routes of recognition. But basically, all of this is gathered in a system of monitoring for each of the large territories where we work. So the leadership can really see what's going on and what the decisions they make about that when there is something about, the rights, territorial rights, or the issues with oil and mining in the territories as well. So it's basically used. It is technical, but it has a very important component of enforcing or strengthening rather governance, territorial governance. So that's the use of it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anne and Carmen, for sharing these experiences with us. I think this is a really very nice example of how collaborative research can be very useful for taking decisions on the ground and right away without having to waiting for the paper or so, but really implementing the results of research directly on the ground. And I think that this question leads us very well to the second part of the panel. So without further ado, I know there are many other questions, but we will have time to go to some more after the next speaker. So I would like to invite, it's a pleasure to have you here. I would like to invite Gasodá Surui to give his presentation on the role of indigenous peoples and local communities in conserving the Amazon and preventing points of no return. Let me as well introduce you properly. So Gasodá is the General Coordinator of the Indigenous Cultural Center, Paiter, Wagôh, Pakob at the Federal University of Rondônia. He has a degree on tourism from the São Paulo Lucas University Center in Porto Velho, Rondônia, a master in geography, and currently he's doing his PhD on the graduate program in geography at the Federal University of Rondônia. Gasodá belongs to the Gamep group, which is one of the 4 clan groups that make up the Paiter Surui Society of the Indigenous Lands 7 de Setembro in Cacoacal, Rondônia. Please, the floor is you, and welcome. Gasodá? Hello, Gasodá?
Gasodá, você pode começar a sua apresentação agora? Can somebody from the team check if he is having problems or what happened with him? Should we move? Let's wait a couple of seconds, otherwise we move to you, Lilian.
I also
Okay.
was provided with a video, Marielos, but I don't know if you want to play it after Lilian just to give him one
Oh,
more
yeah,
chance. Oh, great. Here we
he's
go.
back. Yeah. Boa tarde, Gasodá. If you could, seja bem-vindo. Se você quiser começar a sua fala. Faz favor.
Gasodá, você pode começar a falar que nós estamos te aguardando.
Oi, bom dia. Estão me escutando? Eu tive problema no meu notebook, por isso que eu não entrei no aparelho oficial. Eu estou improvisando aqui.
Tá muito bom.
Obrigada, viu?
Então, eu já
Que não-
posso começar a falar, né?
Então, compartilhe seus
É,
slides.
a gente tem apresentação, né? Acho que é a Júlia que vai exibir ela para mim, né? É, eu vou começar falando, dizer que eu estou muito feliz, né, de poder estar tendo essa oportunidade de falar, né, sobre o meu povo, né, especificamente no contexto de um tema muito importante, né, para todos nós, ser humano, né, independente da raça, da cor, da religião e do lugar onde ela estiver, né? Então, o planeta Terra, ela é de todos, né? Então, por isso que todos nós, ser humano, temos a missão, né, de cuidar, proteger por o nosso próprio benefício, né? E sempre visando as nossas futuras gerações, né? Que são os nossos filhos, nossos netos, né? E então a gente precisa cuidar a mãe natureza nesse sentido, né? Então, assim, eu quero falar aqui especificamente do meu povo, né? Eu não sei se já foi falado um pouco da minha pessoa, né? Então, aqui eu quero também me apresentar, né? Eu me chamo Gasodá Surui, né? Sou indígena do povo Paiter, né? Paiter, que em Tupimondé, idioma do meu povo, significa gente de verdade, né? E também somos conhecidos como Surui de Rondônia. Dentro do meu povo, eu faço parte do grupo clânico UNGA, que significa maribondo preto, né? UNGA, que é um dos 4 grupos clânicos que compõem a sociedade Paiter. Eu nasci no dia 1º de agosto de 1979, aqui na terra indígena 7 de setembro mesmo, numa aldeia chamada Nambecorabaraquiba, que é hoje que onde teve o primeiro contato do povo Paiter com a sociedade não indígena, né? Então, hoje, atualmente, eu moro numa outra aldeia que se chama Aldeia Paiter Linha 9, né? Eu sou casado com Maria Leonice Tupari, indígena de outro povo aqui do estado de Rondônia mesmo, né? E eu tenho 2 filhos, uma Piritiaireuá, que é uma menina de 12 anos, e Oiapangavarum, Paiter Surui, que é um menino de 10 anos, né? Eu sou graduado em turismo, né, pelo Centro Universitário São Lucas de Porto Velho, Rondônia, e tenho mestrado em Geografia e atualmente estou cursando um doutorado em Geografia pela Universidade Federal de Rondônia, né? E onde eu faço parte do grupo de pesquisa Gente, Geografia, Natureza e Territorialidade Humana, né? Desde 2020, eu faço parte do grupo de pesquisa, né? Que é o SPA, que é o Painel Científico para a Amazônia, né? Como todos sabem, né? Eu também sou fotógrafo, né? E eu gosto de registrar a cultura do meu povo, a natureza, né? E a luta dos povos indígenas aqui do meu estado, né? E aqui em Rondônia nós temos quase 56 povos diferentes, né? De indígenas, né? E aqui na minha aldeia, além de ser pesquisador, eu sou coordenador de uma organização indígena comunitária aqui da aldeia, chamado Centro Cultural Paiter Wagôh, né? E antes de eu falar um pouco, sobre a importância dos povos indígenas na preservação da Amazônia, eu quero primeiramente falar um pouco do meu povo, né? A nossa história, a nossa trajetória de luta, né? Antes e o pós-contato, né? Então, o meu povo, como eu falei, é Paiter Surui, né? E Paiter em Tupi-Mondé, como eu falei, significa gente de verdade, o povo guerreiro, o nós mesmos, né? E também somos conhecidos como Surui, né? Na verdade, Surui é um apelido que nós deram no início do contato, em 1969, né?
Oh, it seems.
Nosso território hoje se chama Terra Indígena 7 de Setembro, né? E, como eu falei, a nossa sociedade ela é composta por 4 grupos clânicos, né? Ngamé, Ngamir, Caban e Macor. E com doenças, pandemia, nosso povo foi quase dizimado totalmente, que chegou na casa de 250 pessoas. Hoje, quase 54 anos depois, somar 1.700 pessoas é um motivo de muita conquista, né, para nós, né? Isso significa que somos um povo guerreiro, resistente, né, a essa luta, né? E o nosso sistema de governança é feito é liderado pelo cacique geral, que é eleito pelo povo Paiter Surui, né? Pode passar. Então, aqui eu quero falar um pouco da terra indígena, né? O nosso território se chama Terra Indígena 7 de Setembro, porque porque tivemos o primeiro contato no dia 7 de setembro de 1969, né? E para nós, o nosso território é conhecido como Paiter-Icará, que significa território dos Paiter, né? E hoje eu sempre costumo falar que antes do contato, nós, povos indígenas, nós não tínhamos limite, né? De espaço. E depois do contato, muitos povos indígenas no Brasil passaram até o limite do seu território, né? Então, nós, Paiter, não é diferente. Então, hoje a gente habita um território de 248 mil hectares, né? Que está localizado entre os estados de Rondônia e Mato Grosso. E hoje é um território indígena demarcado, homologado, né? Graças à luta de nossas lideranças, né? No passado, né? E hoje, dentro do território, nós temos 28 aldeias espalhadas, né? Sendo que 24 aldeias estão em Rondônia e 4 aldeias em Mato Grosso. Aqui está o mapa da terra indígena. Pode passar. Então, aqui são fotos que registram o desafio que nós, Paiter, passamos depois do contato com a sociedade não indígena, né? Pandemias de gripe, sarampo, malária, catapora, que quase dizimou o nosso povo, como eu falei agora há pouco. Pode passar. E também convivemos desde o contato com invasões do nosso território, né? Através de exploração ilegal de madeira, garimpo, né? Desmatamento ilegal para arrendamento de pasto, né? E entrada clandestina de caçadores e pescadores dentro do nosso território, né? Pode passar. Então, isso foi um momento muito difícil no início para nós, né? Então, muitos indígenas foram manipulados pelos garimpeiros, pelos madeireiros, pelos fazendeiros, para eles explorarem ilegalmente o território, né? Então, assim, muitas indígenas acabaram se envolvendo, né? Na década de 90, né? E começaram a retirar madeira, garimpo, arrendar seu território para fazendeiros, né? Para madeireiro, garimpeiro, né? Então, isso trouxe uma dificuldade muito grande para a gente, né? Então, assim, muitos paiter começaram a se prostituir, drogas, bebida. Muitos indígenas começaram a ir embora para a cidade, né? Casar com não indígena, largando suas famílias, né? Então, isso, de alguma forma, trouxe preocupação para a nossa liderança e para o nosso povo, né? E assim, em 2000, a gente começou, através da nossa liderança, buscar outras alternativas para a gente poder explorar, usar o nosso território de uma forma sustentável, né? E assim, em 2000, a gente fez o nosso plano de gestão da terra indígena, né? Que foi uma ferramenta muito importante, né? Para a gente mudar, né? Do que a gente estava convivendo, né? Então, esse estudo foi muito importante, tanto que trouxe uma orientação muito importante para a gente entender qual é o potencial do nosso território e o que ela tem para oferecer para a gente, para que a gente possa realmente trabalhar em projetos e iniciativas sustentáveis, sem trazer impacto, como madeira, garimpo, arrendamento trazia para o nosso povo, né? Então, assim nasce o Plano de Gestão da Terra Indígena 7 de setembro, em 2000. Pode passar. Então, aqui está outras ferramentas que foram importantes nessa construção, nessa elaboração do plano de gestão, né? Aqui foi feito etnozoneamento da terra indígena 7 de setembro, né? Que foi um estudo importante para a gente identificar onde estão os lugares sagrados, os recursos naturais e culturais importantes para a vida do nosso povo, né? E aqui também fizemos um mapeamento cultural que também trouxe uma visão de como que o povo paiter pode usar o seu território, né, sem agredir os espaços sagrados e culturais que tem dentro do nosso território. Pode passar. E também para fortalecer a nossa ideia, o nosso pensamento, a gente também investiu muito na construção de vários planos de negócios para trazer realmente autonomia para a nossa comunidade, para que a gente possa, de fato, trabalhar junto com a nossa comunidade em projetos e atividades sustentáveis para fortalecimento da nossa cultura, geração de renda, né? E outros. E assim a gente conseguiu fazer planos de negócio do turismo, plano de negócio do artesanato, também investimos em projetos de carbono florestal Paiter Surui, tá? Então, pode passar. E hoje, muitas aldeias, eles, através desses estudos, hoje eles tocam seus projetos de uma forma independente, autônomo, né? E assim também, em 2016, eu, junto com a minha comunidade, a gente criou o Centro Cultural Indígena Paiter Wagôh, né? Então, que foi criado em 2016 e que, desde a sua criação, ele sempre trabalha com fortalecimento da cultura, dos conhecimentos tradicionais do povo Paiter e também com a proteção do nosso território, né? Como eu falei, desde o início do contato até os dias atuais, o nosso território sofre ameaça, né? Sofre impacto da pressão da cultura não indígena, né? Pode passar. E, e esse é o centro cultural hoje, né? Então, hoje a gente usa para lugar de fazer reunião, roda de conversa, passar o conhecimento do povo Paiter através dos nossos anciões para nossos jovens, né? E para que ele também possa contribuir com o futuro do nosso povo, né? Valorizando, preservando nossa cultura, cuidar do nosso território, né? Então, hoje o Centro Cultural ela está localizado na terra indígena 7 de Setembro, no meio da floresta, né? Então, além de a gente trabalhar com o nosso povo, nós também recebemos, né, intercâmbio com outros povos, né? Também recebemos visita organizada, planejada de turistas, pesquisadores, escolas pública e privada aqui do nosso município e região, aqui do nosso estado, né? Porque a gente entende que a gente precisa, além de a gente se organizar internamente dentro do nosso território, a gente precisa dialogar com nossos vizinhos, com o nosso município, com o nosso estado, o que nós, Paiter, pensamos, o que nós sonhamos, de que forma nós contribuímos com o desenvolvimento do nosso país através de nossos projetos de cultura, de extrativismo e agricultura sustentável, né? Então, hoje, nós usamos o Centro Cultural para esse local de diálogo com a sociedade, né? Não somente com nós, povos indígenas, mas com demais pessoas que compõem a nossa sociedade brasileira, né? E do mundo todo também. Pode passar. Então, aqui está algumas atividades que nós fazemos aqui no Centro Cultural, né? Aqui está a primeira imagem, a nossa anciã repassando o conhecimento da medicina tradicional para o nosso jovem, né? A nossa pintura corporal, a nossa segurança alimentar, né? Roda de conversa para fortalecer a nossa luta, né? A nossa política, né? Aqui está a nossa agricultura sustentável, né? Tradicional, né? Onde a gente planta cará, mandioca, batata, milho, para fortalecer a vida do nosso povo, né? Pode passar. E aqui está, como eu falei, aqui a gente também trabalha com etnoturismo, né? No Centro Cultural, onde a gente recebe muitas pessoas, né? De várias partes do Brasil, do mundo, né? Então, esse trabalho é muito importante, não só pela geração de renda, mas também para mostrar a cultura indígena, né? Porque eu sempre costumo falar para as pessoas que a melhor maneira de você compreender, ajudar, a colaborar, construir o seu país é conhecer outro, né? Conhecer outra cultura, né? Então, hoje o centro ele é referência nesse sentido, né? Além de trabalhar com o fortalecimento da cultura, a gente traz as pessoas para conhecer a nossa realidade, né? Quais são as nossas dificuldades, os nossos desafios que nós enfrentamos aqui dentro do nosso território e de que forma que as pessoas podem nós colaborar, contribuir, para que a gente possa, junto, coletivamente, construir um mundo melhor para todos, né? Porque aqui a gente mostra não só a nossa cultura, mas a forma que nós cuidamos, protegemos a nossa floresta de vários ataques de invasores, né? Que ameaçam o nosso território. Pode passar. E aqui está o trabalho que nós também investimos dentro do Centro Cultural, que é a vigilância e proteção do nosso território, né? Então, aqui nós fazemos vigilância, né, em grupos, em equipes, e essas pessoas que trabalham na vigilância, proteção do nosso território, eles são capacitados, né, pelos nossos liderança, pelos nossos guerreiros, né, porque fazer vigilância dentro do território, em plena imensidão da floresta, não é fácil não, né, porque o território Paiter é muito grande, né. Então, tem dias que a gente sai daqui da aldeia para fazer vigilância de a pé de quase 30 quilômetros, né? 40 quilômetros em meia floresta, né? Então, por isso que a gente sempre está ajudando a eles entender melhor de como que eles podem fazer esse trabalho cada dia vez melhor para que, de fato, eles possam cuidar, proteger o nosso território, que é um bem, um patrimônio para o nosso povo, né? Porque dentro da nossa floresta tem nossa medicina, nosso artesanato, nosso alimento, caça, pesca, né? E, e que por isso a gente precisa cuidar ela sempre, né? E para manter, cuidar a nossa floresta não é fácil não, né? Então a gente acaba correndo risco de vida, né? Então hoje a gente precisa muito do apoio do governo, né? Trazer segurança para os povos indígenas quando eles vão cuidar do seu território, né? Então, esse é um trabalho muito importante que nós estamos trabalhando aqui no Centro Cultural, né? Nós mesmos cuidar do nosso território, né? E a gente precisa que o governo olhe para isso, né? E trazer segurança para essas pessoas que cuidam do território indígena, né? Pode passar. Então, assim, esse é um pouco da nossa mensagem que eu quis trazer para esse momento, né? Porque assim, os Paiter, desde quando tiveram o primeiro contato com a sociedade não indígena em 1969, a gente carrega conosco essa responsabilidade de cuidar, proteger o nosso território, né? E que todo esse tempo não tem sido fácil, né? Porque quando nós demarcamos o nosso território em 1988, nós perdemos muitos nossos guerreiros, né, em conflito com o fazendeiro, com o grileiro, né? Porque quando o nosso território foi demarcado em 1988, aqui já foi invadido, né? Aqui moravam pessoas, né? Então, para retirar isso, houve muito conflito, houve muita morte de nossa liderança, nossos caciques na época, né? Então, hoje, território indígena 7 de setembro demarcado, homologado, é fruto de um trabalho muito árduo, né? Através das nossas lideranças, que muitos deles hoje não estão mais entre nós, muitos já partiram ao encontro dos nossos ancestrais, né? E hoje, nós, novas gerações, a gente tem essa responsabilidade de continuar o legado dos nossos pais, dos nossos avós, dos nossos tios, que já se foram, né? Então, hoje, eu sou, além de pesquisador, automaticamente eu represento o meu povo, né? Então, por isso que a gente precisa estar atento ao que está acontecendo, para que a gente possa dialogar, articular o que nós devemos fazer quanto às coisas ilegais que estão acontecendo do nosso território, né? Então, Então, graças à sabedoria, ao conhecimento que nós, povos indígenas, temos, hoje nós estamos tentando levar a nossa vida adiante, né? Assim, muitos estão trabalhando com projetos sustentáveis através da orientação do plano de gestão que eu falei, né? Porque o plano de gestão foi muito importante nesse momento crucial que o povo Paiter tem passado pós-contato, né? Se não tivesse essa ideia de construir, elaborar o plano de gestão, eu não sei qual caminho que o povo Paiter teria tomado, né? Então, hoje, graças ao plano de gestão, muitos Paiter estão trabalhando com iniciativas culturais sustentáveis, como turismo, artesanato, extrativismo de castanha. Muitos Paiter hoje são agricultores, né? Familiares, trabalham com café, banana, cacau, né? E reflorestamento de áreas degradadas que tem aqui no nosso território, né? Então, isso para nós traz uma esperança muito grande que nós estamos cada vez mais tentando conquistar o nosso espaço, buscando o nosso espaço para que a gente possa, nós mesmos, carregar o nosso povo sem depender de pessoas de fora, né? Então, assim, hoje nós estamos investindo muito na educação para nossos filhos, né? Muitos países já estão na escola, na universidade, fazendo mestrado, doutorado, sendo pesquisadores, professores indígenas, agentes de saúde, né? Então, assim, estamos conquistando o nosso espaço e ocupando áreas para ajudar o nosso povo, né? Então, esse tem sido fundamental para que o povo Paiter pudesse chegar, né? Esse ponto que chegamos, né? E mostrar para o mundo que nós, povos indígenas, também somos capazes, né? De, de colaborar, contribuir nessa construção de um mundo melhor para todos, usando a nossa sabedoria milenar, juntando o conhecimento não indígena, né? Então, esse trabalho que foi feito dentro do território foi feito de uma forma coletiva, conjunto, conhecimento indígena e conhecimento não indígena junto, né? Então, assim, nós, Paité, estamos tentando caminhar, levar a nossa luta adiante, né? E ainda mais momentos difíceis que nós estamos passando hoje, né? O governo sempre querendo violar direito dos povos indígenas hoje no Brasil, né? Eu creio que o mundo todo está acompanhando essa questão do marco temporal, né? E que ameaça toda essa conquista, esse direito que os povos indígenas vêm conquistando, usando sua sabedoria, seu conhecimento, não só para o seu povo, mas para o mundo todo, né? Agora, a questão de floresta em pé é um benefício não só para nós povos indígenas, é para o mundo todo, né? Porque a floresta em pé, ela traz um controle de equilíbrio climático que é muito importante para a vida humana. Hoje, aqui na Amazônia, nós estamos passando por um calor absurdo. Eu nunca vi chegar a 45 graus aqui na Amazônia, mas estamos passando aqui 45 graus, né? E a gente vê aqui que cada dia que passa, o clima está mudando, né? E as coisas vai só piorando para nós humanos. Então, esse é um pouco da minha mensagem e muito obrigado a todos.
Muito obrigado, Gasodá. I will switch to English, but thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you for providing answers to many questions that people had posted in terms of how to link different sources of knowledge. I think the examples that you provided are a very good example of how the combination of indigenous knowledge, ancestral knowledge can be linked to more current knowledge and the benefits of that approach, and also the role that that indigenous people can have on the conservation of the Amazon, with very concrete examples of what can be done and what could be replicated in other territories and in other regions of the Amazon. So thank you very much for your presentation. I think that you gave a very good introduction, also a very good road to the presentation of Lilian Paiter. Lilian is going to be talking about challenges and opportunities for Indigenous territorial management. Lilian, if you could start putting your presentation, I will introduce you very briefly. Lilian is the director of the Bolivian program of the Wildlife Conservation Society. She's a conservation practitioner with a PhD from Liverpool University. And since 2005, she has led the Bolivian program of the Wildlife Conservation Society, focusing on integrating local, national, and regional perspectives and efforts to achieve tangible benefits for both nature and people. The floor is yours, Lilian.
Thank you very much, Marielos. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you also to all the previous speakers for your wonderful presentations. And some of the information that you have provided more in depth, I will repeat some of the concepts, but I think maybe just reinforcing all the fantastic information and experience that the previous speakers have presented. So as Marielo said, I'll be talking about challenges and opportunities for Indigenous territorial management. I have organized the opportunities in 3 themes. One, the opportunities provided by Indigenous territories that result from their historical occupation of the Amazon. Secondly, those that are provided by the extent and the connectivity provided by Indigenous territories. And thirdly, the opportunities that are provided by, through Indigenous territorial management. These opportunities are also the principal responses to the serious threats that are faced by the Amazon, both to indigenous peoples and their territories, and also beyond. For example, illegal land occupation, illegal logging, illegal mining, and wildlife traffic. In terms of historical occupation, well, we heard for 12,000 years, there has been human presence in the Amazon, and this has allowed for cultural innovation, agricultural development, and technology. This long period of human occupation has given rise to approximately 300 indigenous languages that are spoken in the region. And the southwest of the Amazon is a particularly important area because of its impressive concentrations of linguistic isolation, which is important at a global scale. And all this reflects the depth and diversity of the cultures that have flourished in the Amazon. Indigenous peoples and local communities are fundamental for the management and conservation of both biodiversity and agricultural diversity. Their traditional knowledge systems have been passed down through generations and include sustainable agricultural techniques and ethnobotanical knowledge that have both shaped and maintained today Amazonian biodiversity. So the potential for sustainable use of biodiversity and the Amazon depends on this intrinsic relationship between culture, knowledge, indigenous knowledge, and the natural ecosystems. Indigenous peoples and local communities, with their knowledge and vision of respecting nature, are the guardians of the biological and cultural wealth of the region and play a vital role for the future for the region and everybody in the Amazon and the planet. In terms of extent and connectivity, half of the Amazon in this map from RISE, half of the Amazon is maintained within protected areas and indigenous lands. And a lot of time, these indigenous lands and protected areas are either neighboring each other or overlapping. This maintains landscape level, terrestrial level, and aquatic level connectivity that represent the main opportunities for responding to the three global crises of biodiversity loss, climate change, and prevention of future pandemics. This is due to the fact that these well-conserved areas harbor the highest biodiversity, maintain water sources, and hold substantial carbon reservoirs, but they also form part of corridors that enable the conservation of large populations, for example, of wide-ranging species such as jaguar, that have larger populations have got a greater capacity to adapt to the new climatic conditions. And this applies not only at a terrestrial level through altitudinal connectivity gradients or latitudinal gradients, but also at the aquatic level, maintaining aquatic connectivity at a basin scale. And this is particularly important at the Andean, Amazonian, Atlantic connectivity of aquatic ecosystem, which is required to maintain unimpeded flow of a natural load of sediments and nutrients. And also indigenous lands and the neighboring protected areas help maintain a natural pulse of the rivers that require the conservation of at least 80% of the native vegetation in floodplains. The second opportunity provided by the third opportunity provided by indigenous people and their lands is the alternative for establishing territorial governance. As we've heard from the example from Gasodá, a lot of the indigenous people across the Amazon in the different countries have fought for their territorial rights and are in the process of strengthening their territorial management capacity. And although the different indigenous peoples have got different variations and focuses on implementing their life plans or indigenous territorial plans, the process for strengthening indigenous territorial management in general can be summarized through 10 steps that are represented here in a river because they are not necessarily sequential, and like a river sometimes go back towards repeating and reviewing a previous step. And these 10 steps begin with a focus on establishing the required legal recognition of the territorial rights over their lands. Then strengthening the organization and leadership, establishing collective decisions about how the territories are going to be managed through life plans or indigenous territorial plans. Coupled with that, zoning processes, establishing agreements about which areas are going to be used for what activities, developing regulations on how to manage natural resources, internal regulations, and implementing sustainable natural resource management projects that respond both to subsistence needs, but are also sometimes linked to markets. Then territorial control and surveillance, of course, and sustainable funding mechanisms and capacity for monitoring and research through a focus of a knowledge dialogue between Western science and traditional knowledge. The presence of, we've heard 2.2 million people, indigenous people and local communities that are only 4.6% of the population and of the Amazon, is key for the control actions over about 25% of the Amazon, no? And in the face of increasing threats, this presence of 2.2 million people is sometimes the only alternative to maintaining governance over a vast expanse of the Amazon. And also, it is a subsidy to conserving these vast areas through their own territorial visions, that when you project the financial costs of supporting indigenous territorial management, our efforts here in Bolivia have looked at that with a third of what is necessary to conserve a hectare within a protected area, you can support effective indigenous territorial management. And sometimes it is also more effective than implementation of control and vigilance within protected areas. In fact, deforestation within indigenous territories and local communities, community territories, as we have heard from the previous presentations, is 2.8 or sometimes more times lower than in areas outside of them, even when you take into account their proximity to roads, no? For example, here on the right is a map of deforestation along the San Buenaventura to Ixiamas road in northern La Paz, where the Tacana indigenous territory is found. And areas along that road that are titled to the Tacana communities have got about 3 times lower deforestation rates than areas that were not titled to the indigenous territory, even at the same distance to that road. An opportunity now, hence, responding to these facts that indigenous territorial management is an effective way to maintain culture, to provide and strengthen local livelihoods, to fulfill obligations of human rights and recognition of indigenous rights. The need now is to find a way to visibilize increase the visibility of the role of indigenous people, not as partners to conservation organizations or beneficiaries of conservation implementation, but actually self-governance and self-determined management of those spaces. And in order to do that, it is necessary to establish across the Amazon and at different scales financial mechanisms that will support indigenous territorial management efforts as an integral and a diverse implementation, not only through natural resource management projects. We have carried out, supported the indigenous people in Northern La Paz to carry out an analysis, a historical analysis of the last 10 years of what their needs, financial needs are for effective territorial management in Northern La Paz, considering all these different steps and an integral vision of territorial management, and have found that for a basic land management without taking into account implementation of specific natural resource management projects that often are more easily funded through government programs or more short-term support from either the private or public sector, that for 10 years, per hectare, these 4 indigenous groups and the regional organization that manage 1.5 million hectares, they only need for basic management of those territories $7,700,000, which is about $0.5 per hectare per year. So although it seems like a lot of money, it's actually a very effective way to conserve nature whilst having a whole load of different positive impacts on local livelihoods and indigenous territorial rights. Some of the key performance indicators that can be achieved by supporting indigenous territorial management, self-governed indigenous territorial management, are biodiversity values, species representativeness, richness, hectares of forest, hectares under management, hectares of forest under management, connectivity, considering this altitudinal and latitudinal connectivity between indigenous territories and protected areas, provision of water, implementation of environmental and social safeguards, respect for human rights, reduction of CO2 emissions, a percentage of number of beneficiaries and percentage of women beneficiaries, additional income to the indigenous families, and conservation of cultural values. Now passing to the threats, we have heard from all the previous speakers about how land rights across the Amazon are at critical risk from different interests that are driving land profiteering, the expansion of agribusiness, and illegal activities such as illegal logging and mining, resulting on damages to the ecosystems and biodiversities and ecosystem services, but also threatening the territorial rights and even the legislative framework recognizing these territorial rights. Given the fact that across the Amazon, there is little investment from the government in terms of infrastructure and protection of these territories, the most effective and creative solutions to addressing these threats are coming from the indigenous peoples themselves and their communities through an autonomous process. And these actions obviously require greater support from authorities in order to combat the organized crime and strengthen law enforcement, along everything else that entails the development of multi-level capacities for information management and traceability of financial flows that are supporting these illegal activities. But the role of indigenous people across the Amazon, there are numerous examples about how they are presenting alternatives to addressing these threats. One example of this is related to this issue that we have been discussing about knowledge, indigenous knowledge and the dialogue with Western science and the increasing participation of indigenous people in leading research themselves. This is a summary of the results of a research project carried out by the indigenous people in Northern La Paz as a result of their concern of the increasing mining activities in the headwaters to their territories. They carried out their own process in alliance with research institutions, carried out the sampling with due individual consent to take hair samples in the communities along the Beni River and its tributaries of the Eseejas, Mosetenes, Uchupiamonas, Tacanas, and Lecos. And what they have found is that 71.3% of their community members have got higher levels of mercury in their system than what is considered the highest level by the World Health Organization. And these levels are particularly high in those communities that have got a traditional practice, a traditional diet that is more based on fish, such is the case of the Eseejas in particular.
Lilian, one to two more minutes.
Okay, I'm almost done.
Okay,
That
thanks.
is fine. That is fine. So in terms of these increasing threats, the whole region is increasingly threatened by the financial flows from the illicit drug trade that is fueling other criminal economies, including illegal land occupation, illegal logging, illegal mining, and wildlife traffic. This is in the 2022 World Drug Reports. And there are violent hotspots that are proliferating across the region. Indigenous peoples are disproportionately affected by this violence and displacement, and also disproportionately affected by mercury poisoning. Another threat to indigenous territorial management, and this is my last slide, is the migration of young people from the indigenous territories to the cities in the face of poor access to basic services, education, and opportunities to fulfill their potential. Recognizing and valuing the importance of this dialogue between the traditional knowledge and Western knowledge is key to maintain and promote different alternatives and futures for the indigenous people that need to be there to maintain this capacity to conserve these vast areas of land within the Amazon and their ecosystem service. Here it is in the right, a photo of a process that we are carrying out of defining what is heritage from the perspective of indigenous people, with the collaboration and leadership of the Bonn University in archaeological research. And with that, I conclude. Thank you.
Thank you, Lilian, for your presentation and for bringing us very concrete examples on how of threats and challenges and potential solutions to all these issues. Also very, I think, very important, very relevant to hear the cases you presented as you are working in the Bolivian Amazon. So it's good to see what are the similarities and the differences, and we see, unfortunately, similarities in threats and but also, solutions that can be used in one of the others. So I thank you very much for your presentation. So I would like now to give the floor to André Baniwa. He is going to be talking on he's going to be sharing with us his experience in sustainable local development and the importance of traditional or cultural knowledge of indigenous people for protecting forests and climate. I don't know, André, if you have a presentation or will you just give a speech?
Boa tarde, Jaque. Estão me ouvindo?
Estamos, sim.
Ok. Bom, eu vou fazer fala só, não tenho apresentação.
Aí, melhor, obrigada. Deixa eu te apresentar bem rapidinho, tá?
Tá bom.
Então, back to English. André is the vice president from 2021 to 2024 of the indigenous organization da Bacia do Icaná. And he has been the last, I think, 20 years occupying different functions as leader of different indigenous organization. So with this, I would like to give you the floor, André. Thank you for being here. I know that has been very difficult for you to make it, so we are very happy to have you here. Please, if you could give your speech.
Boa tarde a todos, obrigado, Mariela. Bom, eu coloquei para falar um pouco da experiência nos últimos anos, como foi apresentada. Eu tenho trabalhado com conhecimento tradicional Baniwa, do povo Baniwa. Essas andanças e ocupações também de cargos na gestão pública também tem feito em mim uma reflexão também sobre a importância dos conhecimentos tradicionais indígenas. E no últimos anos, esse ano especialmente, estando no Ministério dos Povos Indígenas, inicialmente trabalhando um pouco na demarcação de terras indígenas, depois agora na coordenação geral de promoção à cidadania e combate ao racismo. Essas coisas faz eu ter uma visão do que está acontecendo. Na cúpula da Amazônia, no âmbito do processo da discussão da cúpula da Amazônia também, que falei bastante sobre conhecimentos tradicionais indígenas aos cientistas em Manaus. Participei também de debate no âmbito da bioeconomia, com cientistas também em Belém. Coordenei uma discussão sobre proteção de territórios e a integridade dos povos indígenas, desenvolvimento sustentável da Amazônia. Tudo isso um pouco eu vou juntar para falar para vocês a importância desses conhecimentos tradicionais. Esses conhecimentos tradicionais indígenas, ela tem grande potencial no sentido da proteção e proteção desses territórios, da proteção dos povos indígenas. Há necessidade da segurança pública também aos povos indígenas, aos territórios dos povos indígenas, se a gente quiser conservá-las como propõe a discussão, proteger a Amazônia. O conhecimento indígena, assim como o meu parente Paiter Surui apresentou, tem muitas situações no Brasil. Povos indígenas organizados, com projeto, com plano de gestão territorial e ambiental, desenvolvimento de suas experiências, mas também tem outros que não têm isso, não tem organização, não tem CNPJ, não tem plano de gestão ainda. E isso é uma situação bastante preocupante. A gente olhando a nossa experiência do povo Baniwa no Alto Rio Negro, onde tem 23 povos indígenas, organizada em uma federação das organizações indígenas do Rio Negro, a importância dessa organização para defender, promover e trabalhar com conhecimentos tradicionais indígenas é muito importante, porque somente a partir disso é que lutamos para a concretização dos nossos direitos. A partir de demarcação de nossas terras, homologação das terras, e lutar pela educação escolar indígena específico, saúde indígena específico, que virou Distrito Sanitário Especial Indígena no Brasil, e trabalhar conhecimento indígena também na geração de renda, organizando produtos indígenas, criando marcas indígenas, no caso, a arte Baniwa, da pimenta, que atualmente estamos trabalhando, e tudo isso depois de uma invasão de terras indígenas do Alto Rio Negro, por garimpeiros, pelas empresas, e que tem deixado uma consequência muito grave nos povos indígenas. A partir desses projetos do movimento indígena, das organizações indígenas, do povo Baniwa, nos últimos anos, tem tido uma tentativa de invasão dessas terras novamente. Aí a gente vê a importância desses conhecimentos, das experiências, porque não conseguiram invadir nossas terras. Mesmo usando o poder do Estado como segurança nacional, usando o CPRM, que é uma instituição do governo, contando com o apoio dos pelotões, não conseguiram romper a nossa proteção, que é a nossa consciência do nosso direito, da nossa experiência, tem sido muito importante nesse sentido. Isso é falando da importância local e que tem assegurado os nossos direitos. Os conhecimentos indígenas local têm incomodado, inclusive, políticos, né? Políticos de Brasília, do poder legislativo aqui do nosso país. O senador que coordena a CPI das ONGs acabou citando, por exemplo, a pimenta Baniwa. Eu fiquei imaginando por que um senador de nível nacional e nós completamente local, pequeno, experiência, tenha incomodado tanto o senador para citar a pimenta como um caso trabalho dos ONGs que ficam mandando nos povos indígenas. Ele não teria citado isso se essa experiência não tivesse um potencial muito grande de proteger contra ações que discrimina, que traz preconceitos, desmatamento, invasão das terras indígenas. Eu acho que por isso que ele citou a pimenta Baniwa. Bom, esse é para citar para vocês a razão das minhas falas nos últimos tempos. Olhando um pouco o que aconteceu na cúpula da Amazônia, eu vejo ainda que, em relação a conhecimentos tradicionais indígenas, apesar no Brasil ter já lei da biodiversidade e proteção de conhecimentos, mas ainda há resistência de aceitar esse tipo de conhecimento. Uma parte da sociedade já reconhece a importância desses conhecimentos tradicionais, mas há resistência e negação de aceitação desses conhecimentos. E, junto com ela, a negação de aceitação da existência dos povos indígenas, quando a gente vê proposta de retirada de direitos, como está acontecendo no Poder Legislativo brasileiro, a qual repudio, porque o Congresso Nacional tem mais de 60% que são anti-indígenas hoje no país, e a gente precisa de apoio internacional, de muitos parceiros, para a gente continuar lutando. No caso, a reflexão a partir da cúpula da Amazônia é que a gente precisa, além das propostas ou ações colocadas para os governos, a gente precisa criar específico da sociedade espaços para discussão dessa proteção e da segurança desses territórios, segurança dos povos indígenas na Amazônia. Para mim ficou muito claro, há essa necessidade, né? E o encontro da cúpula da Amazônia dos governos focou muito em cima da UTCA, que é a Organização do Tratado de Cooperação Amazônica, onde tentamos colocar também a questão indígena, né? Para que pudesse estar ali um grupo de indígenas para assessoramento dessa organização importante para a valorização de conhecimento e incidir também na proteção desses territórios dos povos indígenas. A outra coisa que deixou muito claro para mim essa participação que eu tenho feito é que desmatamento da Amazônia, ou destruição da Amazônia, vem do lado de fora, mas com aliança e aliados internos da Amazônia, dos amazônidas. E quem defende a Amazônia são amazônidas da Amazônia, interno, com aliados externos. Não sei se vocês percebem isso, mas eu consigo perceber. Então, qual é a questão importante para a gente pensar? Como enfrentar essa situação para a gente proteger a Amazônia, para a gente garantir a segurança e a proteção dessas áreas de proteção dos territórios indígenas na Amazônia. Eu acho que esse é um desafio importante, porque um pesquisador na Amazônia ele apresentou tipos diferentes de capitalismo que está chegando. Capitalismo, vamos dizer, mais manso, mais capitalismo selvagem, que mata, contrata, manda matar quem é defensor da Amazônia, quem é defensor dos direitos para proteger a Amazônia. Então, eu acho que a ciência, os pesquisadores deveriam avançar em encontrar essas pessoas, porque o que motiva eles? É só orgulho? A gente sabe que, historicamente, os povos indígenas foram negados a existência para dominar os territórios. Mas essa negar a existência é de matar, de extinção de povos indígenas, extinção de seus conhecimentos, extinção das suas línguas e tomada de seus territórios. E me parece que essa ação continua viva e está acontecendo isso no âmbito do Congresso Nacional. Bom, é isso que eu queria trazer para vocês de reflexão. Espero ter contribuído de alguma forma para fortalecimento da proteção, da segurança e conservação da Amazônia. Eu espero que conhecimentos indígenas, cada vez mais, ela possa ser aceita, expandida e utilizada para esse fim. Obrigado.
Obrigada a você, André. Thank you, André, for your speech. I prefer the way that you say it in Portuguese. Thank you for your fala. I think you brought many reflections, and also some of the reflections that I was actually thinking of putting as well on the table. So reflections exactly on about the need of incorporating traditional knowledge, indigenous knowledge on the decision making that that we do when we are aiming to when we are aiming or when we are talking about the conservation of the Amazon. I also very much like the when you say that there is a need to have to create a space for dialogue and of exchange of knowledge and I don't know how you say this in English, of saberes, and from different, from all the ones that are interested in protecting in conserving the Amazon. But obviously, and you say this as well, we do need to understand what are the forces going in the opposite direction. What are the drivers leading, the actors leading to deforestation? What are the interests about that leading to those changes? Because it's only understanding then that we may be able to come up with actions against them. We did get several questions, and I would like maybe to allow a couple of them in the few minutes that we have, and that's these are related to issues. For example, people were asking about the relation between indigenous people and the movement on socio-bioeconomy. How can we amplify actions of indigenous and local communities leading to the protection of the Amazon to other levels of government, of other citizens and how can we civil, academic, and scientific society work actively together to protect Amazonian cultures, but also the forest. So I don't know if any of you panelists want to reflect on those very briefly each, so that we can maybe hear you all.
Sure. If you like, Marielos, what I would like to say is that I think in terms of conservation projects or socio-bioeconomy projects or infrastructure projects or any outside intervention, needs to take into account indigenous territorial vision, and the indigenous territories need to have that internal strength in order to engage with any external stakeholder. So I think, as you would do for an energy project or any intervention that is more, potentially considered more negative, even a socio bioeconomy project should engage with the indigenous territories, contrasting the indigenous territorial vision with the proposal by that intervention, and in particular ensure that the indigenous territory has got very clear legal land rights over that space, because I think it's in the case of indigenous lands that haven't been titled yet, an intervention that is linked to the market could lead to the displacement of the indigenous communities.
Thank you, Lilian.
Would you like to to say thank you for the opportunity. It's amazing. This theme is so crucial to preserve it, to recover the losses we done in the forest. And as many presentations, we saw how Amazon is important for everybody, not only for people that live in Amazon, but in South America and then for world. Amazon is important, including for our water cycle, you know, the carbon cycle, the energy balance, you know, and the indigenous act as a very important guardian of this territory and the functions that is important for everybody. Then first, thank you for indigenous, you know, for the wisdom. They are from centuries there, and just with 5 decades, this humanity that seems to be very, very civilized, evolved, destroys so large amount of the forest. Then thank you, and we need to learn with you this wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you, Luciana. Annie?
Yeah, I just saw some comments on the Marco Temporal and importance of the indigenous peoples to do what they need to do in the territory, and it's a sovereignty question. I think the indigenous peoples, they need to have protection, to have their land, and they should be using their land the way they think. I think it should be used in the way that keep their culture, but this is up to them. I think the most important thing is the territorial protection in terms of legal protection of their land. And this is a very important thing. So there is this saying about, oh, but indigenous peoples, they have bad sanitation, bad this and bad this and bad that. The indigenous peoples that don't have land, such as the ones in the south of Brazil, for example, that were expropriated from their land, they live in a very bad social condition. And so that's why, again, the territorial rights are very important for indigenous peoples. And this is a matter of good life or not good life. So I just leave that like that, and would like to thank you for the invitation. And this is a very, very important debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. Carmen?
I just wanted to comment something that Gasodá brought to his presentation, which was excellent, which is that it's so important for the organized indigenous peoples to think about their, in that case was a plano de gestão, something, plan de vida. It could have different names. But the fact of the matter is that the participatory construction of it to provide this vision in the middle of all these problems and threats and pressures, but the fact of the need of having a north, or a a route that they envision how to live in their territories is so important. But then what is also tremendously important is the implementation of that vision, of that plan. And plans there have been many, probably thousands. And the problem is always at some point, for one thing, conflicts with the legal framework of the countries, which is a problem, and in many different senses. For instance, oil and gas industries, mining, concessions, and all of that enters in conflict with these indigenous territories and the visions of the people. So really beginning to solve those kinds of problems, having much more open, participatory, and transparent dialogues, and providing the resources and all the capacities or trainings or whatever that are needed for those plans to become a reality, that is the only way.
Thank you, Carmen. Some final words, Gasodá or André? No? So final comments from anybody? No?
Eu quero comentar.
Faz favor, André.
Eu quero agradecer bastante essa oportunidade de poder falar. Eu acho que o Brasil, os povos indígenas da Amazônia, elas precisam muito de apoio para colocar em prática seus planos. Esses projetos, esses planos de gestão territorial são pensados para um sistema de vida. É que hoje o mundo não oferece apoio para isso. Os apoios têm sido apenas temáticas. Só que o plano de gestão territorial vai desde fiscalização, proteção, saúde, educação escolar, geração de renda. Então, ela é um plano completo de vida, né? E, por isso, elas merecem um tratamento diferenciado para poder reconstruir, eu falo dessa forma, reconstruir o bem viver que foi destruído com a colonização e que continua e insiste em destruir a vida dos povos indígenas, e ela precisa se fortalecer, né, traduzindo seus conhecimentos para a linguagem técnica, científica, porque essa tradução é importante, porque milenarmente usamos esses conhecimentos, mas do jeito que nós as usamos, não é reconhecido pela sociedade que é organizada o Estado, que tem um modo diferente de produzir conhecimento. Então, essa tradução tem custo também. Então, ela precisa receber esses apoios, inclusive para entrar no serviço público de saúde, de atendimento, na proteção social, na proteção dos territórios. Todas essas questões são importantes e é urgente que pudesse isso acontecer, já que enfrentamos situações que nos deixam uma reflexão. Será que quanto tempo ainda vamos sobreviver na Terra, né? Então, é urgente quem pudesse ajudar os povos indígenas para fortalecer esses conhecimentos para o sentido da proteção seria importante. Muito obrigado pela oportunidade.
Obrigada a você. Okay. Thank you all. I'm assuming, Gasodá, that you are fine. Thank you all for being here today, for the exchange of information. I think it has been very enriching to hear your positions, and we have covered lots of terrain from very technical results, but explain very clearly to what can we do in the territories and what kind of processes can we cover, and what are potential solutions to the issues and challenges that we are facing in the Amazon. So I thank you, all the speakers, for being here with us today. I thank also the audience and all the whole team that is behind the scenes supporting us and allowing this to happen. Hopefully, we will be able to have many more moments in which we can have a dialogue and reflect on what are the steps forwards towards towards a reconstruction of a better living for the Amazon. Thank you very much again, and have a good day.